If you had told me a year ago that moving into a new apartment with a total stranger would lead to the most complicated emotional experience of my life, I would have laughed and said, "Relax, it's just a roommate." But now I know better. Because no matter how simple you think life is, no matter how tightly you try to keep things in a box, people are messy. And some moments, they don't stay moments. They become memories that haunt the quiet. I had just turned 24 when I moved to the city, fresh out of college, starting a new job at a small digital marketing firm. My budget was tight, and the idea of living alone wasn't just lonely, it was expensive. So I did what most desperate 20-somethings do. I posted an ad. Roommate wanted. Clean. Non-smoker. Chill. Must love dogs. No drama. Within a week, I had 4 interviews and one guy who ghosted me mid-text. But then there was Adrian. He emailed me at 2 a.m., the subject line read. Saw your post. I'm normal. I swear. The email was short, casual, and kind of funny. I'm 25, work in architecture, not a serial killer, can provide references from coworkers and ex-roommates who are still alive. I make great omelets. Let me know if you're down to meet. Something about the tone made me laugh. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. He was, well, different from what I expected. Tall, handsome in that effortless way. Wore all black, but not the moody kind. More like the quiet confidence kind. His eyes were dark, and his voice was deep but calm. We talked for 30 minutes. He asked smart questions. Didn't overshare. Didn't flirt. Just present. In control. Normal. Which is exactly what I thought I needed. 2 weeks later, Adrian moved in. The apartment was a decent 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, with floors, small balcony, slightly haunted sounding pipes. But the price was right, and we each had our own space. In the beginning, things were routine. We split the bills evenly, took turns with trash and dishes, had a shared Google Calendar for cleaning days, and every Friday night, he made those legendary omelets. He wasn't loud, wasn't nosy. He liked indie movies, old jazz records, and obscure documentaries about broken cities. I liked that he didn't ask a lot of personal questions, because the truth was, I didn't have a lot I wanted to talk about. I came out in college, quietly, to a few close friends. My parents still didn't know. My dating life? Sparse. One boyfriend in junior year. A couple of awkward flings after that. Nothing serious. Nothing I ever brought home. So when I met Adrian, I told myself it was nice to have someone normal around. Someone I didn't have to explain anything to. And that worked. For a while. But then came that night. The night that changed everything. And I still don't know what to call it. A shift? A mistake? A warning? Or the beginning of something I should have seen coming all along. It was a Saturday in late November. Cold, damp gray. Adrian had just broken up with someone. I didn't know the full story. I never even knew he was dating. He came home that night with red eyes, walked straight to his room, and didn't come out for 2 hours. At around 10 p.m., he knocked on my door. I was lying on my bed, scrolling through emails. He peeked in. "Hey, you got a second?" I nodded. "Yeah, of course." He stepped inside, sat on the edge of my bed, and ran his fingers through his hair. "She ended it," he said. "Didn't even know you were seeing someone." I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged. "Wasn't serious, but still sucks." I didn't ask for details. He didn't offer them. We just sat in silence for a minute. Then he said, "You ever feel like people just look at you and they never really see you?" I looked up at him. His face was relaxed, but his voice was tight, like he was holding something in. "All the time," I said quietly. He smiled. A small, hollow thing. "Thought so." That night, he fell asleep on my bed. Just like that. We were talking about nothing. Random shows we liked, childhood memories, stupid pet stories. And somewhere between the second story and the third, he dozed off. I didn't move him. I just lay there, eyes on the ceiling, feeling his body shift gently beside mine with every breath. His arm brushed mine once. Then again, I should have nudged him awake. Should have said, "Hey man, your room's right there." But I didn't, because something about the way the room felt, warm, quiet, shared, it reminded me of something I didn't even know I missed. He woke up around 3 a.m. I was still awake. He looked confused for a second, then stretched, yawned, and said, "Damn, sorry, didn't mean to crash here." "It's fine," I said. He sat up slowly, looked at me, and then he did something I still can't explain. He touched my wrist, not hard, not suggestive, just his fingers, light and steady, over my pulse, like he was checking if I was still real. "Thanks," he said, "for tonight." And then he stood, left the room, and closed the door behind him. The next morning, we didn't talk about it. Not the wrist, not the staying, not the fact that I hadn't slept a second. He made coffee. I made toast. And everything was exactly as it had always been. Except it wasn't. Because now, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. That touch. That space between us that had always felt harmless. Until it didn't. And I realized something that morning, standing at the sink, staring into my coffee cup. This wasn't just a roommate situation anymore. At least, not for me. If you've ever had a moment that felt harmless until it wasn't, then you know how quickly silence can become something more. But this was only the beginning. What happened next left me questioning everything I thought I knew about him and myself. If the story spoke to you, let us know in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe for more real, unforgettable moments, because the next part might hit even closer to home. The morning after Adrian touched my wrist, everything looked the same. Same sun pouring into the blinds. Same 2 mugs by the sink. Same Adrian in the kitchen, messy hair, hoodie, scrolling his phone while coffee brewed. But something in me had shifted, quietly, sharply, like a chair being pulled half an inch off-center. You can still sit, but you'll never be fully comfortable again. I wondered if he remembered what he did. That small, almost tender gesture. His fingers brushing the inside of my wrist, like he was reading my heartbeat through touch. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. And maybe the worst part was that I wanted it to mean something. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Morning." He handed me a mug like nothing had happened. He was casual, comfortable, unbothered. "Got work today?" "Yeah, half day." "Cool. I might at the gym later. Then go out for a bit. You need anything for the store?" I shook my head. "No, I'm good." And that was that. Nothing more. Nothing weird. Except the quiet in my head was deafening. I tried to go about my day like normal, but I kept replaying that moment in bed, over and over again. The way he touched my wrist. The way his voice softened when he said, "Thanks for tonight." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Slow, almost apologetic, almost intimate. Had he been crying before he came to my room? Was it just vulnerability? Was I reading too much into something innocent? But then why had he sat so close? Why hadn't he gone back to his own bed? And why couldn't I stop thinking about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, lights off, heart racing at nothing. Around 2 a.m., I heard the floor creak outside my door. Then saw footsteps. Then silence. I waited. Nothing happened. But my door never clicked shut, which meant he had come close, maybe even stood there. I almost got up, almost opened the door, but I didn't, because I was afraid of what I wanted, and even more afraid of what he wanted. The next week was quiet between us. Not awkward, not cold, just safe, routine. He went to work. I went to work. We crossed paths in the kitchen, on the couch, in the hallway. Sometimes our arms brushed. Sometimes we exchanged quick smiles. But neither of us brought up that night. Maybe he forgot it. But I couldn't. Because every time I saw him, shirtless after a shower, laughing at a movie, stretching on the living room floor, I caught myself watching. Longer than I should. Deeper than I should. Like I was studying him. Or remembering something that hadn't even happened yet. Then, about 10 days later, it happened again. This time, I was the one who crossed the line. We were watching something dumb on Netflix. a reality show he swore he hated but kept turning back on every night. It was late. We were both half sprawled on the couch. He was in basketball shorts and a hoodie. No socks. I was in sweats, barefoot, holding a half-finished bowl of popcorn between us. Somewhere between episodes, we stopped talking. The room was dark except for the TV's glow. And then, I don't know why I did it, I shifted closer. Our legs brushed. I didn't move. Neither did he. Then his hand dropped between us. Close. Very close. I felt his pinky graze mine. Once. Then again. He didn't look at me. And I didn't look at him. But I let my hand stay there. Unmoving. Almost touching. Breathing that unspoken tension like oxygen. When the episode ended, he stood. Stretched. Then turned to me, voice a little hoarse. "Night," he said. "Night." And that was it. He went to bed. I stayed on the couch for another hour, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that this wasn't what it felt like, that this wasn't a slow unraveling of a boundary we'd never defined. The next morning, there was a note on the kitchen counter. "Went out early. Be back later. Don't eat all the cereal. A." I stared at the way he signed his initial, just a letter A, sharp and curved and confident. Even his handwriting had this strange energy. Like him, controlled, but hiding something under the surface. That night, I decided I needed to say something. Anything. Just open a door. So I knocked on his door around 10:30. He opened it a second later, shirtless, damp hair, towel over his shoulder. I nearly forgot what I was going to say. He leaned against the frame. "What's up?" I hesitated. "Can we talk?" "Sure." He stepped back and let me in. The room smelled like mint and soap. His bed was unmade. Laptop open. Low jazz playing from a speaker. He sat on the edge of the bed, and I sat on the chair across from him. And for a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I said it. "I keep thinking about the other night." He tilted his head slightly. "Which part?" "When you touched my wrist." Silence. His eyes didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. Then finally he said, "Yeah, I remember." I exhaled. Did it mean something? A longer silence. Then he said, "Did it mean something to you?" I stared at him. There it was. The line. And we were standing on it. Together. I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know how. But my silence was an answer. And he heard it. He stood, walked over, kneeled in front of me, and placed his hand over mine. Soft. "Careful. I don't want to mess this up," he whispered. "You're not." "I might." I looked into his eyes, and whispered back, "Then don't." He didn't kiss me. Not yet. Not that night. But we stayed like that for a long time, breathing the same air, holding the moment between us like a secret neither of us could speak aloud. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't about friendship anymore. Not even close. If you've ever sat across from someone and felt the entire world go quiet just because of how they looked at you, then you understand what happened that night. But trust me, what came next was even more unexpected. Watch part 3 to find out what line we finally crossed. I thought the moment would pass. That after he touched my hand, after we locked eyes in that quiet, unfinished exchange, the tension would fade. That we'd laugh about it one day or pretend it had never happened. But it didn't fade. It grew, like something waiting in the corner of a room, patiently expanding into every part of the house. The next morning, Adrian and I barely spoke. Not out of awkwardness, though it was something else. Like we both agreed without words that if we open our mouths, everything might come pouring out. Too fast, too soon. He nodded at me while sipping his coffee. I nodded back, and we left it at that. But when I got back from work that evening, I found something on the living room table. A Post-it note. "Dinner's on me. Don't ask questions. Just be hungry." And next to it, 2 takeout boxes from that Thai place down the street we both always talked about but never ordered from because of the price. He was already sitting on the floor in sweatpants, scrolling something on his phone, barefoot, hair messy, casual like nothing was happening at all. But something was. because when he looked up and saw me, he smiled like he'd been waiting for me all day. We didn't talk about the hand-holding. We didn't talk about feelings. We just ate, sitting cross-legged on the floor like we were college roommates again, joking about spice levels and whether or not tofu was worth the hype. But halfway through dinner, his foot brushed mine. He didn't move it. Neither did I. And for the rest of the meal, our feet stayed tangled under the table, like a secret handshake. No one else would ever know. Later that night, we watched a movie. Or tried to. Because I don't remember anything about the plot. I was too aware of the way our bodies inched closer by the minute. The way his arm brushed mine. The way his breath slowed. Until finally, near the end, he tilted his head slightly and whispered, "Can I ask you something?" I turned. "Have you ever wanted something you thought you weren't supposed to want?" My mouth went dry. I swallowed. "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "Me too." Then, for the first time since we moved in together, he looked at me not like a roommate, not like a friend, but like someone who was holding back everything he wanted to say. The movie ended. He didn't move. Neither did I. The room felt impossibly still. Then Adrian leaned closer, barely an inch, then paused. "I don't want to get this wrong," he said, his voice low, almost trembling. "You're not," I whispered. And that's when it happened. He kissed me, gently, cautiously, like he was asking a question with his lips. And I answered, without hesitation, because in that moment, everything finally made sense. Why I couldn't stop thinking about him. Why every silence between us felt louder than any conversation. Why that single touch on my wrist had felt like someone pulling a thread I didn't know was connected to my heart. The kiss didn't last long, but the aftermath was louder than thunder, because when we pulled away, neither of us smiled. We just looked at each other, scared, breathless, changed. He sat back, rubbed his face, and let out a shaky exhale. "Shit," he whispered. "Yeah," I replied. We both knew what we'd done, and what it meant, because it wasn't a game, not a curiosity, not a drunken mistake. We were sober, present, and for the first time, fully honest. I slept in my room that night, alone, door shut, but I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, trying to breathe through the weight of it all. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was fear, the kind that only comes when you realize something real has started, and you have no idea where it's going to lead. The next day, things were different, not on the surface. We still had breakfast, still tossed jokes across the hallway, still shared laundry detergent, and fought over whose turn it was to take the trash out. But underneath, there was something new, a current, a signal, something that buzzed under every word. That Friday night, we kissed again. And this time it wasn't careful. It wasn't soft. It was real, messy, urgent. We stood in the hallway between our rooms, barely a foot apart. He had just come out of the shower, hair damp, towel slung around his neck. I had just finished brushing my teeth when we collided in the space between our doors. No words, just the silence of weeks finally breaking open. We didn't sleep together that night, but we didn't go to our own rooms either. We sat in the living room, tangled up on the couch, his hand resting on my leg, my head on his shoulder. We didn't talk much, didn't need to, because something unspoken had already been said, and it would only get harder to ignore. Later that night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to find him looking at me. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. I don't know what this is yet, but it feels like something." I nodded slowly. "It does." He smiled. "Promise me one thing?" "Anything. No matter what happens, let's not lie to each other." "Deal." But promises are easy in the middle of the night. It's the mornings that test you. And what happened in the days that followed would test us both more than either of us were ready for. Because not everyone around us was ready for the truth. And some truths don't stay quiet for long. It didn't take long before someone noticed. Not that we were together, not yet anyway, not in any way that could be defined or confessed. But something between Adrian and me had shifted, and like heat leaking through walls in winter, People around us started to feel it, and the first to mention it was Maya. She was a friend of mine from college. Sharp, nosy in a loving way, always reading people better than they read themselves. She came over one afternoon to drop off a jacket I'd left at her place during a rainstorm a week ago. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking cheap iced coffee and catching up on gossip when Adrian walked in, shirt damp with sweat, headphones still around his neck. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, nodded politely, and said, "Hey!" Maya smiled at him. "Hi, roommate." He left as quickly as he came, heading straight for the shower. She waited until he was out of earshot, then turned to me with a sly look in her eyes. "Okay, spill it." I played dumb. "Spill what?" She raised her eyebrows. "You and your roommate. Something's going on." I laughed too fast. "No, we just hang out a lot." "Uh-huh, and he just looks at you like that because he enjoys your taste in dish soap?" I tried to keep my face neutral, but I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. Maya wasn't stupid. She leaned back, sipped her drink, and said, "Listen, you don't have to tell me anything, but don't lie to yourself, okay? Just because it doesn't have a label doesn't mean it's not real." I nodded slowly, because that's exactly what I was doing, telling myself that if we didn't name it, if we kept it vague, it wouldn't become something that could break. But Maya's words hung in the air long after she left. That night, Adrian and I watched the movie again. We didn't sit at opposite ends of the couch anymore. We didn't pretend to avoid each other's hands. But we still hadn't talked about what this was, about what we were doing, about what it might mean. Halfway through the film, I paused it. He looked at me. "What's up?" I hesitated, then said, "Do you think we're making a mistake?" He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his jaw, then leaned back and sighed. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe, but it doesn't feel like one." And that was enough for now. Still, a strange tension started to build. Not between us, not exactly, but around us. A subtle pressure that came from pretending everything was normal when nothing was. We were still two guys sharing an apartment, but now we shared too much silence. Too many glances. Too many nights tangled in blankets we never used to share. One morning, I woke up to find him cooking breakfast, shirtless, humming softly to himself. I walked in behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and rested my chin on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, just smiled and kept flipping eggs. It felt easy, natural, but as I sat at the table, watching him, I couldn't shake the thought, how long can this last before it changes everything else? The first real crack came on a Tuesday. Adrian's co-worker Max showed up unannounced. They were supposed to meet for drinks, but Max had come early, figuring it wouldn't matter. I opened the door, startled, still wearing pajama pants and no shirt. Max blinked. "Hey, Adrian here?" He's still in the shower. Max stepped inside, awkwardly looking around. "Cool place." I nodded and gestured toward the couch. He sat down, glancing at the table where Adrian had left 2 empty wine glasses and a record still spinning softly on the player. "You guys had a night, huh?" he joked. I shrugged. "Just hung out." Max gave a polite smile, but I could feel it, that flicker of suspicion behind his eyes. A moment later, Adrian walked in, towel around his neck, hair wet, t-shirt half pulled over his head. "Oh, hey, man," he said, surprised. "Didn't know you'd show up early." Max smiled thinly. "Yeah, thought I'd just swing by." They left together a few minutes later, and I watched them from the window, Adrian gesturing, Max with his hands in his pockets, eyes darting back toward the building once. That night, Adrian came back quieter than usual. We sat on the balcony in silence. Finally, he said, "Max asked if we were seeing each other." I looked over at him. "What did you say?" I told him no, that we're roommates. That's it. It stung more than I expected. "Do you believe that?" I asked. Adrian stared at the street below for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm trying to figure out what I believe." And just like that, the space between us, the one we closed so slowly, stretched open again. The next week, everything felt paused. We still shared a bed some nights, still kissed in the dark, still touched each other like something soft and secret. But during the day, we acted like we were just two guys living in the same apartment. I wasn't sure if he was pulling back, or if I was just seeing clearly now what I tried to ignore before. That Adrian had walls I couldn't climb, and that I might be falling for someone who wasn't sure if he could ever fall back. Then one night, it all came out. We were sitting on the floor, finishing a late dinner. The city outside was quiet. The dishes were still in the sink. I looked at him and said, "What are we doing?" He looked back at me, serious, tired. "I don't know. You can't keep acting like this doesn't mean anything," I said, my voice low. "Not when you kiss me like that. Not when you hold me at night. I never said it didn't mean anything." "Then say what it does mean, Adrian." He ran a hand through his hair, stood, paced. "I've never done this before," he admitted. "I've never been with a guy. I don't know what to call this. I don't know who I am when I'm with you." I stood too. "You don't have to label it, but you can't pretend it's not real." He stopped pacing, turned, and said the one thing I didn't expect. "I'm scared." I let that sit between us, because I was scared too, but I was also sure that what we had wasn't a phase, wasn't a game, wasn't confusion. It was clarity wrapped in fear. And fear I could handle, if he was willing to stand in it with me. So I walked up to him, placed my hand on his chest, and said, "Then be scared, but don't lie to yourself, and don't lie to me." He looked at me like he wanted to cry, but he didn't. He just nodded, pulled me close, and whispered, "I don't want to lose this, whatever this is." And I believed him. But believing someone doesn't always protect you from what happens next, because feelings are one thing, the world outside is another, and soon the world was going to come knocking. The thing about secrets is they don't stay quiet forever. You can bury them, dress them up as normal, hide them behind closed doors and half smiles. But sooner or later, secrets learn how to walk. And ours had started running. For a while, everything between Adrian and me existed in this strange, fragile space, a quiet middle ground where affection lived in shadows and labels were avoided like landmines. He still touched me gently in the morning, still held me in the dark, still whispered things that felt too honest for someone unsure what he wanted. But the longer it went on, the heavier it became. Not just for me, for him too. Because you can only live in between for so long before something or someone calls you out of hiding. And for us, it started with a message. It came on a Thursday. Adrian and I had just finished eating dinner on the balcony. The night was cool, the sky dusted with stars. We weren't talking much, just sitting there, toes barely touching, a comfortable silence between us. Then his phone buzzed. He picked it up, read the screen, and his whole body stiffened. I watched him carefully. He didn't say anything, just stood up, walked inside, and disappeared into his room. At first, I gave him space. But 20 minutes passed, then 30, and when I knocked on his door, he didn't answer. I found him sitting on the floor, back against the wall, phone in one hand, the other gripping the edge of his hoodie like he was holding himself together by threads. "Adrian," I said gently. He looked up, eyes red, not from crying, not yet, but close. He handed me the phone. It was a screenshot, a message from Max. "Hey," not trying to be rude, but people are starting to talk. If you and your roommate are a thing, you might want to be a little more careful. Some of the guys at work are noticing stuff. I stared at the words for a long time. My throat went dry. "Is that true?" I asked, "Are people really saying stuff?" He nodded. "Apparently, yeah. Max heard it from someone else. And that guy probably heard it from someone else. You know how it goes." I sat down next to him, unsure of what to say. He dropped his head into his hands. "This is bad," he muttered. "So bad." I reached for him, but he flinched, not away from me, but into himself. Like touching me in that moment would make the situation more real. "I told you," he said quietly. "I'm not ready for this. For people knowing. For the questions." I felt my chest tighten. You don't owe anyone an explanation. It's nobody's business. He looked up, eyes sharp now. Except it is. We work with these people. We see them every day. What if someone says something to my boss? What if it spreads? I wanted to tell him that none of it mattered, that if it was real, we could face it together. But I also knew the world we lived in, and I knew how quickly things could turn cruel, especially when people sensed something they didn't understand. That night, we slept in separate rooms, not because we were angry, but because we were afraid. And fear builds walls faster than any argument ever could. The days that followed felt tense in ways I couldn't explain. He was quieter, less present, still kind, still polite. But there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. We still watched TV, still shared space, but the warmth was fading. And for the first time, I felt like I was chasing something that was trying to disappear. Then, one evening, he came home later than usual. He didn't say where he'd been. I didn't ask. He dropped his keys, walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, then closed it again like he wasn't hungry after all. Then he turned to me. "We should talk," he said. I nodded, heart sinking. "Okay." We sat on opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt massive, like an ocean. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything, about us, about what we're doing." I stayed silent, because I already knew where this was going. "I don't regret any of it," he said, "but I think maybe we rushed into something neither of us really understood." I swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need time, space, to figure out what this means for me, for my life." My chest went hollow. "Adrian," he looked down at his hands, "I care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone in a long time. But I can't do this halfway. And right now, I don't know how to do it at all. I should have fought, should have said no, should have told him I'd wait, that we didn't need to figure it all out today. But the truth is, I was tired too, tired of hiding, tired of guessing, tired of living in a space where nothing had a name, but everything carried weight. So I nodded, "Okay." And just like that, we agreed to go back to being roommates, even though we both knew that part of us was already gone. The next few weeks were strange, not cold, just distant. We fell back into routine like people who have forgotten how to look each other in the eye. The couch became neutral territory. The hallway a silent exchange of nods and empty smiles. Sometimes he'd pass me something, the remote, a dish, a beer, and our fingers would brush, and in that single second, everything would come rushing back. The kisses, the nights, the way he whispered my name like it meant something more. But then he'd look away, and so would I, and the moment would be gone. Then one night, something broke, not between us, but inside me. I got home late from a work dinner. The apartment was dark, quiet. I walked into my room, dropped my bag, and collapsed on the bed without changing. I don't know how long I lay there before I heard it. A knock, soft, barely there. I sat up. The door creaked open. Adrian stepped in. He looked different, like he hadn't slept, like something inside him was unraveling. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded. He closed the door behind him and sat on the edge of my bed, hands in his lap. Then, in a voice so soft it barely made sound, he said, "I think I messed up." I looked at him, waited. He took a shaky breath. "I've been trying to protect something that wasn't real. My image, my reputation, this idea of who I'm supposed to be. And in doing that, I think I pushed away the one thing that actually was real." My heart pounded. He looked up, eyes glassy. "I miss you. Every day. Every second. And I'm done pretending like it didn't matter." Silence filled the room. And then, slowly I reached for his hand. He didn't flinch this time. He held on, tightly, desperately. And I whispered, "Then don't run again." "I won't," he said. But even in that moment, even as hope returned, I knew things wouldn't be easy. Because now that the world had noticed us once, it wouldn't stop watching. And the next time, we might not get the chance to hide. When Adrian told me he wouldn't run again, I wanted to believe him. And for a little while, I did. Things between us felt clearer, more intentional, less like a dream that might disappear the second we blinked. He kissed me in the kitchen the next morning without waiting for the shadows to fall. We held hands on the couch that weekend and didn't let go when his phone buzzed. He even started introducing me to friends differently, not as just a roommate, but simply as this is, followed by a smile. But the world doesn't let you stay in that warm, safe middle forever. Not when you've been hiding. Not when someone has already started watching. It started with a knock. A loud, persistent knock at the door one Saturday afternoon while we were watching reruns. Curled up on the couch, Adrian muted the TV. We looked at each other. Neither of us was expecting anyone. He got up first, opened the door, and froze. I stood behind him in seconds. Max, again. But this time, he wasn't smiling. Can I come in? Max asked. His tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't casual either. Adrian stepped aside. I stayed back. Max glanced at me, then back at Adrian. I just came from work, he said, dropping his bag by the chair. Figured I should say this in person. Adrian looked tense. Say what? Max exhaled slowly, like he was choosing every word carefully. People are talking, man. About you. About both of you. Adrian didn't respond. Max continued. Look, I don't care what you do. Seriously. But people are saying things at the office. Jokes. Questions. Assumptions. You know how it goes. Adrian crossed his arms. And you might want to get ahead of it before someone says something to someone higher up. Like, what? You think I'm going to get fired for who I'm dating? I didn't say that, Max said quickly, but you know how subtle stuff works. The cold shoulders, the whispers, the slow fade from projects. You're good at your job, Adrian. Don't let people twist that over something you won't even admit. The room went quiet. I could feel Adrian's anger rising, not the loud kind, but the quiet, dangerous kind. His jaw locked, his hands clenched. I never asked anyone to talk about me, he said. Doesn't matter, Max replied. They are. He glanced at me again, then softened his voice. Look, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. But if this is real, if this thing is something you're serious about, he gestured between us, then maybe it's time to stop hiding, or at least decide if you're ready for what comes next. Then, without another word, Max left, and the silence he left behind was the loudest thing in the room. That night, Adrian didn't say much. We didn't fight, but we didn't fall asleep holding each other either. He lay on his side of the bed, staring at the wall. I lay on mine, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I whispered, "Do you regret it?" He didn't turn, didn't answer, but I heard the breath catch in his throat, and I knew the question scared him, almost as much as the truth did. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, just empty sheets and cold coffee in the pot. I spent the day pacing the apartment, phone in hand, checking it every 10 minutes even though no messages came in. I thought about calling him. Then I thought about what I'd even say if I did. How do you comfort someone who's afraid of being seen? How do you love someone who hasn't decided if they're ready to be loved in public? He came home just after dark, dropped his keys on the table, sat on the edge of the couch like the weight of the whole day had sunk into his bones. I didn't speak. Neither did he. For 5 whole minutes, we sat in silence. Then he looked up at me, eyes tired, but steady. I didn't regret it, he said. I was just afraid you might. I crossed the room, kneeled in front of him, took his hand. I didn't, I said. Not once. He leaned forward until our foreheads touched. Then I think I need to stop hiding. The next few days, Adrian started making small changes. He didn't flinch when I grabbed his hand at the park. He didn't let go when we bumped into a coworker at the cafe. And one night, when Maya came over, he sat next to me on the couch, close enough to say everything without saying anything. Maya noticed. Of course she did. She waited until Adrian went to the kitchen before nudging me and whispering, "Finally!" I laughed. "You're not surprised?" "I'm not blind," she grinned. Then she added, "But I'm proud of him. And you." And for the first time in weeks, I felt something that had been missing: peace. But peace is always temporary, especially when someone decides to take it from you. The next week it happened. A letter, left anonymously at Adrian's desk. Typed, clean, cowardly, no name, no signature, just a single page. We all see what you're doing. Keep your personal business out of the workplace. Some of us don't want to be around it. Adrian didn't tell me right away. I found the letter crumpled in his backpack 2 days later. When I asked him about it, he looked away, shrugged. It's nothing. No, I said, standing in front of him. This is something. You can't just ignore it. I've dealt with worse. That doesn't mean you should have to. He looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes, that familiar hesitation, the old fear creeping back in. I don't want to make a scene, he said. This isn't a scene, I replied. It's your life. He sat down, shoulders heavy. I didn't ask for this. No one does, I said. But you can either keep pretending or finally show them who you are. He was quiet for a long time. Then finally said, I'm scared again. I sat beside him, held his hand. So am I? I whispered, but I'm still here. And he squeezed my hand back. That weekend, Adrian asked to meet with HR. He didn't tell them everything. Didn't name names. Just showed them the letter. Said he wanted it documented. Said he wasn't ashamed. And that was the first time I saw him walk through a room like he didn't owe anyone an explanation. It was a small step, but it was a step. Later that night, we stood on the balcony again. The air was cooler now, the city buzzing below us like a heartbeat. He slipped his hand into mine. I don't know where this is going, he said, but for the first time, I want to find out. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Me too. And for a little while, it felt like maybe we were done hiding. But deep down, I knew the world wasn't done testing us, because someone out there still wasn't finished watching. And the next storm would hit closer than either of us expected. Peace lasted exactly 6 days. 6 days of quiet mornings, hands held without hesitation, and long nights spent tangled in each other's warmth. No fear, no shame, no shadows. For the first time, Adrian wasn't shrinking from himself, and I wasn't holding my breath. We were building something, slowly, carefully, together. But peace, I've learned, is always temporary, especially when someone decides to tear it apart. It started with a message, not an Adrian. To me, an unknown number, no name, no greeting, just one sentence. Might want to tell your boyfriend to check his inbox before the office does. My stomach dropped. I read it twice. Then again, it wasn't just the words. It was a tone, smug, cruel, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I called Adrian immediately. No answer. I texted. No reply. By the time he got home an hour later, his face told me everything. He already knew. He didn't even take off his jacket. Just dropped his phone on the table and sank onto the couch like the air had been knocked out of him. I sat beside him. What happened? He rubbed his eyes, then looked at me, tired, furious, and deeply wounded all at once. Someone emailed photos, he said. Photos? He nodded, jaw tense. To my entire team. Not everyone at the company. Just my team. 5 people. I felt my skin go cold. What kind of photos? Us, on the balcony. That night we were holding each other. My heart dropped. Who would do that? He didn't answer, but the silence between us was loud enough to carry names we hadn't dared say out loud yet. Later that night, he showed me the email. No message, no subject line, just 2 attachments. One photo was from behind, grainy, zoomed in. You could barely make out faces, but the posture, the intimacy, it was obvious. The second was clearer. Us sitting on the balcony, his head resting on my shoulder, my hand in his. A moment meant for no one else. Stolen, shared, weaponized. I felt sick. He didn't speak for the rest of the night. The fallout came quickly. His manager called him in the next morning. It was an interrogation, not officially. Just a check-in, a censored conversation, a clarity discussion. all dressed in polite HR language. But the damage was done. Trust fractured, privacy shattered. And even though no one said anything explicitly, people started looking at him differently, less casually, more carefully, like he was suddenly some strange, delicate thing they didn't quite know how to handle. That night, he didn't come home. No text, no call, just absence. A hollow space beside me where he usually slept. I didn't sleep. I waited until around 4:30 a.m. when the door finally clicked open. He walked in slowly, like someone returning from a war no one else had seen. His eyes were red. And this time, not just from exhaustion. "Where were you?" I asked, standing up. He didn't answer at first. Then finally said, "I drove for a while. Ended up at the lake." "Alone?" "Yeah." I walked over, placed my hand on his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't move either. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have closed the blinds. I didn't think." He shook his head. "It's not your fault. This isn't about a photo. It's about people who can't stand what they don't understand." I looked up at him. "What are you going to do?" He met my eyes, and for the first time in a while, I saw something stronger than fear. Resolve. "I'm not quitting," he said. "I'm not hiding. They wanted to humiliate me. I'm not giving them that power." Over the next few days, Adrian did something I'll never forget. He showed up fully, at work, at home, in public. He didn't shrink. He didn't change his posture or soften his voice to make people more comfortable. He looked everyone in the eye, spoke clearly, did his job better than anyone else in the room. And slowly, some of the whispering stopped. Some people began looking away, not out of shame, but out of respect they didn't quite know how to express. Others stayed cold, distant. But Adrian, he didn't flinch. We never figured out who sent the photos. Max swore it wasn't him, and I believed him. But someone, somewhere, had followed us, captured us, sent that email like a missile. And what scared me more than anything wasn't that they sent it. It was that they knew when to do it. They waited until they knew we were happy, until they knew we had something to lose. That was the part that broke me, because cruelty isn't random. It's calculated. One night, weeks later, Adrian and I sat on the balcony again. Same chairs, same angle, same view, but this time we left the blinds open on purpose. He took a long sip from his beer, then leaned back and said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "They thought they were exposing us, but really they freed us." I raised an eyebrow. He smiled faintly. "If I hadn't gotten that email, I'd probably still be hiding, still playing it safe, still calling this thing between us something less than what it is." I smiled too. "What is it?" He turned to me and said, "Something I'm not ashamed of. We didn't kiss that night. Didn't need to, because what we had now was louder than a photo, bolder than a secret. It was love, complicated, messy, honest love. And whoever had tried to break us, they failed, because we were still here, still together, still choosing each other, even when someone crossed the line. After the photos, after the email, after the looks and the cold silences at work, I thought the worst was behind us. Adrian stood tall through it all. I stood beside him. And slowly, the world seemed to soften. Whispers quieted. People who had kept their distance began offering small signs of support. A nod in the hallway, a kind comment in passing. The slow rebuilding of respect. For the first time in weeks, things began to feel normal, which is exactly why I didn't see the next betrayal coming. Because the most painful cuts never come from enemies. They come from the people you trust. It happened on a Sunday. Adrian had invited his sister, Lena, over for lunch. They were close, not in the overly emotional, call every day kind of way, but in that quiet, steady way where she always had his back. At least, that's what I thought. We'd all hung out before. She'd even joked about our roommate closeness long before we ever admitted what we were. But she never pushed, never pried. So when he finally told her the truth, that we weren't just roommates, she had smiled, hugged him, said she was proud of him. He believed her. So did I. She arrived around noon that Sunday, flowers in hand, casual, comfortable. She hugged me like always, laughed, complimented the playlist we had on. We made pasta, drank wine, talked about nothing and everything. It felt easy, safe, until Adrian stepped out to take a call from his mother. Just 5 minutes. That's all it took. Lena leaned over the counter, lowered her voice, and asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, hesitant. She didn't blink. "Do you love him?" I blinked back. "Yes," I said. "I do." She looked at me for a long second, then said something I wasn't prepared for. "Then why are you letting him destroy his life?" I froze. "What?" She kept her tone even, controlled, like she'd rehearsed this. "I'm not judging. I know this isn't your fault, but he's being reckless. With work, with family, with his future. And it's because of this. Because of you." I stared at her, speechless. "I've known Adrian his whole life," she went on. "He's always been careful, calculated. Now he's suddenly bold, out in the open, challenging people, all for something that might not even last." Her words hit like bricks. "He's finally being himself," I said quietly. She sighed. "I'm not saying he can't be himself, but maybe he doesn't need to do it so loudly, so publicly. You could have kept this private, quiet. Why make it hard on him?" I stepped back, shaken, angry, and heartbroken in a way I hadn't expected, because Lena wasn't yelling. She wasn't hateful. She thought she was helping. And that made it worse, because it reminded me how often love comes with conditions people don't admit until they feel challenged. Adrian came back in a few minutes later, smiling. He didn't notice the tension. Not right away. And I didn't tell him. Not then. Because it wasn't my place to rip open his heart right after he'd begun to let it beat freely. But something shifted after that day. In me, I couldn't unhear her words. Couldn't stop wondering how many others around us felt the same. Polite on the outside, quietly hoping we'd go back to being just roommates, just friends, just a story they could more comfortably explain. And I started pulling back. Not obviously, not intentionally, but Adrian noticed. One night, about a week later, we were brushing our teeth side by side, and he looked at me through the mirror and said, "You've been quieter lately." I shrugged, just tired. He didn't buy it. Did something happen? I paused, then said, "Did Lena say anything to you after she left last Sunday?" He frowned. "No." "Why?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Nothing. Just curious." He watched me for a moment, then said, "Don't lie to me." I looked down at the sink and whispered, "She thinks you're ruining your life." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he put his toothbrush down and left the room. I followed him into the hallway. "Adrian." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, turning sharply. "Because I didn't want to hurt you. You think it didn't hurt more hearing it like this?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then said, "She didn't say it cruelly. She thinks she's protecting you." He laughed bitterly. "Protecting me from what?" "From being happy." "She's scared. People get scared when things change." "And you?" he asked. "Are you scared too?" I paused, then admitted the truth. "Yes." His face fell, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since the early days. Doubt. In me. In us. He didn't sleep in my room that night. Didn't even say goodnight. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I wonder if maybe Lena had gotten what she wanted after all. Not by force, but by planting seeds. The kind that grows silently in the corners of a relationship, twisting everything before you realize the roots are wrapped around your throat. The next morning, he wasn't in the kitchen, wasn't on the balcony. His keys were gone. His shoes, too. I waited until noon. No messages. No signs. Then, finally, a text. "Need some time. I'll be at Lena's." My chest collapsed, because now she wasn't just someone who disapproved. She was a safe place he could run to, and I wasn't. Not anymore. For 2 days, he stayed there. We didn't speak. I barely ate, barely slept, kept staring at the door, like it might open if I wished hard enough. It didn't, until the third night. When it did, he walked in slowly, bag slung over one shoulder, eyes tired, but calm. He looked at me and said, "She doesn't understand." I stayed silent. He continued, "She thinks love is something you do after everything else in your life is safe, stable, approved. She thinks love is supposed to be tidy." He dropped his bag. I told her it's not. He stepped closer. I told her, "You're the reason I feel like I can finally breathe." I felt my throat tighten. "She didn't take it well," he added. "But that's not my problem anymore." I swallowed hard. "And us?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "I'm not giving us up. Not for anyone." And just like that, the light came back into the room. Because love is never about who accepts you. It's about who chooses you. Again and again, even after someone tries to convince them not to. We were stronger after that. Not perfect, not invincible, but real. And for the first time, we weren't afraid of anyone's opinion anymore. Because the only people who needed to understand what we had were the two of us. Some stories aren't meant to be hidden. Ours started in secret. Quiet gestures, midnight conversations, glances too long to be casual. But the longer it went on, the more it demanded space. Light, air, truth doesn't sit well in the dark for too long. And one morning, just days after Adrian came back home, after Lena's words, after the silence, after the ache, we realized something. We'd survived being seen by accident. Now it was time to be seen on purpose. The idea came while we were having breakfast. He was pouring coffee. I was scrolling my phone. The light coming through the kitchen window was soft, slow, like it didn't want to interrupt anything. Then Adrian set his mug down and said, "Let's stop hiding." I looked up. He held my gaze. "I mean, really stop," he said. "No more coded language. No more dodging questions. No more just roommates. I'm done with it." I studied him for a second, unsure if he meant it fully. He did. "I want to tell my parents," he added. "And I want to tell them with you sitting beside me." My heart skipped. Adrian's parents had always been a distant topic. Not because they were cruel, but because they were complicated, traditional, private, proud. He wasn't sure how they'd react to a version of their son they hadn't imagined. And now he wanted to show them everything, with me next to him. It wasn't fear that flooded me in that moment. It was love, and a terrifying, beautiful kind of responsibility. The call happened 3 days later, a Sunday evening. His parents lived 2 states away, so it had to be virtual. Adrian sat on one side of the couch. I sat on the other, not out of distance, but to give him space to lead. When his mother's face appeared on screen, her expression lit up. "Sweetheart," she beamed. "We were just saying how long it's been." Adrian smiled. "I know, Mom. I've been meaning to call." His father appeared beside her, adjusting his glasses. We made small talk for a few minutes. Work, weather, a cousin's wedding we weren't attending. Then Adrian took a breath. "Actually, there's something I want to talk to you about." His mother blinked. His father leaned forward, already alert. Adrian glanced at me, then turned back to the screen. "You know my roommate, the one I've been living with the past year?" His mom nodded slowly. Adrian swallowed. "We're not just roommates." A beat of silence. Then another. "We're together," he said. "As in a couple. He's the person I love." The screen stayed still. His father's eyebrows lifted, but his mouth didn't move. His mother blinked again. "Oh," she said quietly. "I see." Adrian kept going. "I know this might come as a shock, and I don't expect anything overnight, but I wanted you to hear it from me, from us, because I'm not ashamed of who I am." I watched his hand tremble slightly on his knee. His father finally spoke. "I guess we had our suspicions, but we didn't want to assume." His mother still hadn't said much. Her eyes darted from Adrian to me. Then finally she spoke. "You're happy?" she asked. Adrian nodded. "Yes." She looked at me. "And he treats you well?" He smiled just barely and said, "Better than I ever thought I deserved." His mother exhaled, then gave the smallest, saddest smile. Then I guess we have some adjusting to do. It wasn't warm. It wasn't full acceptance. But it wasn't rejection either. And for now, that was enough. After the call, Adrian leaned into me and whispered, "I feel like I can breathe again." I held him. And for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel like I was keeping a secret. A week later, I told my family. I wasn't as calm as Adrian. My hands shook. My mouth went dry. But I told them. And when my sister burst into tears, not of anger, but of overwhelming support, I knew I wasn't alone either. My parents didn't say much, just hugged me longer than usual. My father whispered, "I don't understand it yet, but I'm proud of you for not hiding." That meant more than I expected, because understanding is hard. But sometimes respect can come before understanding. And respect is a damn good place to start. After that, we made a quiet pact. No more hiding. Not from family. Not from friends. Not from ourselves. And so we started showing up as us. Invited to a birthday dinner? We went as a couple. At work events? Adrian didn't lower his voice when mentioning me. At Maya's engagement party? We danced. In front of everyone. No explanations. No shame. Just the truth. Unfolding moment by moment. Like something that had been waiting to live. But truth, no matter how freeing, always comes with risk. One night, while walking home from a local event, hand in hand, a car drove past us slowly, then stopped. 3 men inside. One rolled down the window. "Faggots," he said, calmly, like he was saying good evening. Adrian tensed beside me. The car pulled off slowly. No threats, no violence, just a word, a wound. We didn't speak the rest of the walk. Back at home, we stood in silence near the door. Adrian looked at me, eyes full of something raw. "This is what I was afraid of," he said. "I know," I whispered, "but I'm still glad I did it." And so was I, because choosing truth doesn't mean the world becomes safe. It just means you stop being a prisoner. And that's worth everything. One evening, months later, Maya hosted a dinner. Everyone was there, friends, colleagues, even Max. When Adrian and I walked in holding hands, no one flinched. No one laughed. No one whispered. Max greeted us with a hug and said, "It's about time you two stopped pretending." And that night, for the first time, I looked around the room and felt something I hadn't felt since this story began. Belonging. Later, on our way home, Adrian said something I'll never forget. "You know what the scariest part coming out was?" I shook my head, thinking people would love me less. He paused. "But they didn't. Not the people who matter." I squeezed his hand and said, "That's how you know who your people are." The moment we chose to be seen didn't fix everything, but it changed everything. Because truth, once spoken, becomes a lighthouse. Even if the waves still crash, you never drift as far in the dark again. I used to think courage was loud, like a speech, a protest, a fight, but I've learned it's often quiet. It's in the stillness before you choose to speak, when staying silent would be easier. It's in showing up for someone, not just when it's safe, but when it could cost you something. And one Friday afternoon, Adrian stood in the middle of a room filled with people who'd once questioned him, watched him, judged him, and he chose to speak. Because staying silent was no longer an option. It started with an email, not anonymous this time, not cruel. It was from someone named Marcus, a junior designer on Adrian's team. 24, soft-spoken, smart, always kept his head down. Adrian had always been kind to him, checked in, gave him opportunities others overlooked. The email was short. "Hi, Adrian. I'm sorry if this is weird. I've been struggling with something, and seeing how you've handled things this past year, I just want to say thank you. You helped me feel less alone." Adrian showed me the message while we were having dinner. He didn't say much, but I could tell it hit him deep. A few days later, Marcus asked if they could talk. They met in the break room, a quiet corner of the office, late afternoon light slanting through the blinds. Marcus told Adrian he'd been questioning everything, his identity, his future, his place in the world. He hadn't come out to anyone. Not yet. He'd been afraid. But seeing Adrian, the strength, the grace, the unapologetic presence, had made him wonder if maybe he didn't have to keep hiding forever. Adrian listened. He didn't push, didn't preach, just sat beside him and said, "You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps you miserable." Marcus smiled and then cried. Because sometimes kindness is the bravest thing you can offer someone when they feel like they're disappearing. Word got around, not about Marcus, but about the fact that Adrian was more than just a high performer. He was becoming something else, someone people trusted, respected, and slowly admired, which is exactly why the next meeting changed everything. It was a company-wide all-hands meeting. Once a quarter, everyone gathered in the big conference room or joined virtually. Announcements, updates, celebrations, half formal, half forgettable. Except this time, the head of HR made a brief statement. We're exploring the creation of new employee resource groups, ERGs, to support diversity across departments. If anyone would like to propose or lead one, we'd love to hear from you. It was one line, a throwaway moment, but Adrian caught it. Later that night, he turned to me and said, "What if I started one? A group? For LGBTQ plus employees." I blinked. "You'd lead it?" He nodded. "I think it's time." The next few weeks were a blur. He filled out proposals, had meetings with HR, spoke with leadership. At first, people were supportive, cautiously. Then came the questions. Not official pushback, just polite hesitation. Wouldn't it be better if it were more general? Maybe include other forms of diversity, not just identity? Do you think it'll make some people uncomfortable? That last one stuck with him. Uncomfortable, like his truth was a disruption. But he didn't back down, because being uncomfortable is how change begins. Then came the real test. Leadership asked if he'd be willing to share his story at the next company gathering. Not in private, not in email, live, on stage. It wasn't a requirement, but it was an opportunity. Adrian didn't answer right away. He spent a weekend thinking, pacing, rewriting 100 different versions of what he might say. And then one night, he stood on our balcony and said, "If I don't do it now, I'll always wish I had." The day of the meeting, I walked him to the train. He wore his navy blazer, the one he saved for serious days. He looked calm, but his hands were shaking. "Whatever happens in there," I told him, "you're already braver than most people ever learn to be." He smiled. "I just want to say something true." The room was full, hundreds of faces, in person and on screen. The CEO spoke first, then a few department updates. Numbers, charts, then Adrian's name was called. He walked to the front, took the mic, and paused, just for a breath, long enough for people to wonder what might come next. Then he said, "Most of you know me as a project lead, some of you as a co-worker. A few of you probably don't know me at all. That's okay. What I want to share isn't a business update. It's not a performance metric or a new strategy. It's just me. Last year, someone in this office sent private photos of me and my partner to others, without my consent. It was meant to shame me, to silence me. It didn't. Instead, it reminded me that silence is a choice, and I'm done choosing it. I'm gay, and I'm proud of who I am, proud of the person I share my life with. Some of you may feel uncomfortable. That's okay, too. But growth usually starts there. I want this company to be a place where people don't have to choose between being excellent at what they do and being honest about who they are. That's why I'm starting an LGBTQ plus employee resource group, not just for visibility, but for support, for connection, for anyone who's ever felt like they had to edit themselves just to feel safe. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm just here to tell the truth. The room was silent when he finished. Then one person clapped. Then another, until the entire room stood, applauding, not just out of support, but out of respect, because they saw something rare, a man choosing honesty over comfort, and daring others to do the same. That night he came home, dropped his bag, and said, "It's done." I stood up. "Are you okay?" He walked over, kissed me. I've never been more okay in my life. The next morning, his inbox was full. Messages from people across the company. Some he barely knew. Some he'd never spoken to. Some said, "Thank you." Some said, "Me too." One said, "You helped me see that I don't have to hide anymore." That one made him cry. Not everyone clapped forever. There were still closed doors, still cautious glances. But Adrian didn't flinch anymore, because he'd already done the hardest thing. He'd spoken up, and the echo of his truth was louder than any whisper behind his back. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just speak, even when your voice shakes, especially when it shakes, because your truth might be the permission someone else has been waiting for. The night it all came full circle wasn't loud. There was no music, no champagne, no grand announcement. Just the two of us in the room where it all began. My room, the same one where Adrian had once stood in the doorway with cautious eyes and too many walls. The same one where we first crossed the blurry line between comfort and curiosity, where silence had once meant confusion, where every look had been a question. And now, somehow, all of that had turned into something solid, something neither of us needed to explain anymore. It had been almost a year since that first night, the night I'd woken up to find Adrian in my bed, his body tense, his breathing soft and uneven. I remember thinking then, this isn't nothing. I just didn't know what it was yet. Now I did. It was love, the quiet kind, the kind that grows in the corners of rooms and in the spaces between fear and hope. And standing there with him now, in that same doorway, I realized something simple. We'd made it, not perfectly, not painlessly, but truthfully. And that's all I ever wanted. That evening, Adrian had taken me to a rooftop restaurant. Nothing flashy, just high enough above the noise to feel like we were floating. We sat close, talked less, looked more. Sometimes when people settle into each other, the silences stop feeling empty. They feel earned. There was a comfort now between us that didn't need to prove anything. He'd said what he needed to say, to his team, to his family, to himself. I had too. We were no longer hiding. And still, somehow, we remain ourselves. After dinner, we walked back slowly. It was spring, cool wind, the kind of night that asks you to remember it. Adrian stopped in front of a florist, closed, but the window still lit with pale yellow light. He pointed at a bouquet. "Those are the flowers Lena brought that Sunday," he said softly. I nodded. "She texted me yesterday." That got my attention. "What did she say?" "She said she still doesn't get it, but she's trying. Asked if you'd come to dinner sometime soon." I smiled gently. "I'd like that." He smiled too. "She's still awkward. Still says the wrong thing." "So does everyone," I said. "That's how we learn." He nodded, then added, "Thanks for not making me pick between her and you. You never had to." But deep down, I knew the fear had been real, and it wasn't gone. It was just something we carried differently now, like old bruises that don't hurt anymore, but remind you how far you've come. When we got back to the apartment, Adrian paused in the hallway. "I want to stay in your room tonight," he said. "Okay," I smiled. "You do that every night." He shook his head. "No, I mean, stay. I'm moving my stuff out of mine, into yours, if that's okay." I stared at him. "Are you serious?" He shrugged. "Your mattress is better." I laughed. He stepped closer. "And because it's always felt like our room." I just didn't say it out loud. My chest warmed. "Then let's say it now," I whispered. He nodded. Together, we spent the next few hours moving his things across the hallway. Drawers, books, clothes he barely wore. It felt silly and significant all at once. He placed a photo of us on the nightstand, one Maya had taken a month ago. We weren't posing, just laughing at something stupid. He said it looked like peace. And it did. Later that night, after the lights were off, we lay in bed facing each other. No phones, no distractions. Just the soft hush of the ceiling fan above and the occasional sound of the city humming in the background. Adrian reached out and traced a finger across my wrist. Slow, thoughtful. "I didn't think I'd ever get here," he said. "Where? This. Us. A version of my life where I'm not pretending." I stayed quiet. because I knew what he meant. He'd been pretending long before we ever met. And letting go of that, the performance, the caution, had cost him something. But it gave him something too. A self he could finally recognize. "You think we'll last?" he asked suddenly. The question came out small, almost scared. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted him to believe what I was about to say. So I pulled his hand to my chest and whispered, "Yes." He blinked. "Really?" I nodded. "Because we've already been to the part where most people fall apart, and we're still here." He looked at me, eyes full of that soft, quiet hope I'd only recently learned to read in him. Then he said, "I love you." The first time he'd ever said it that plainly. No fear, no pause, no disguise, just truth. I didn't say it back right away. Not because I didn't feel it, but because in that moment, I wanted him to know what it meant for me to say it. So I kissed his palm, held it there, and said, "I love you too." Not with desperation, but with certainty. The kind that builds slowly, like a song you hum before realizing it's always been your favorite. We fell asleep like that, hands touching, no tension, no unfinished conversations. And as I drifted off, I thought about how everything began, about the quiet nights, the awkward glances, the moments we thought were small. And I realized something simple, something that finally made sense. Nothing about us was ever small, not even in the beginning. We just didn't know what to call it yet. But now we do. Now we know it was love, and it always had been.